What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Two Game Podcast. It is finally time to dive into Daredevil Born Again. I have reviewed the first 3 seasons of the Netflix Daredevil series, so you can go check that out right here. Those links right there. I've been very excited for Born Again. I was very curious to know how Disney would handle this rebirth of a series from Netflix. You know, would it be Disney-fied or Marvel-fied, I should say? Would the violence be tamed down? Would they be able to carry the same aesthetic, same look and feel of the show? Those were kind of just big question marks that I had going into this show. And we finally got the first 2 episodes. So from this point forward, I'm going to be talking about full spoilers for episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour. Highly recommend going to check out that episode before you listen to my thoughts and my review for the episode. I'm going to give you a quick little recap of what happened in episode 1. And then I'll give you my full thoughts on it. So, full spoilers from this point forward. If you have not seen it, this is your last warning. So, in episode 1, we have Matt, Karen, and Paige. They're off celebrating at Josie's for this Detective Cherry's retirement. And then that's when Bullseye shows up. He attacks everybody at the bar. Foggy is severely injured in the attack and ends up dying in Karen's arms. Matt goes full rage mode and just tosses Bullseye off of a roof in hopes that it would kill him. I ended up not killing him, but a year later, he has retired as Daredevil, and he has partnered with a former district attorney, Kirsten McDuffie. Karen has moved to San Francisco, while Bullseye has now been giving a life sentence for all of his crimes. Kirsten sets Matt up on a date with this therapist, Heather, and the two kind of hit it off. And then after gaining enough signatures, and with his wife Vanessa's support, Wilson Fisk returns and decides to run for the mayor of New York City, launching this anti-vigilante campaign. And in a private chat with Matt, Fisk assures Matt that he is not involved in Foggy's murder, as he kept his promise of not murdering Matt's friends at the very end of season 3. And Matt warns Fisk that he will retaliate if he steps out of line. Fisk responds by warning that there will be consequences if Matt restarts his activities as Daredevil. On his second date with Heather, Matt learns that Fisk has won the election, and that is kind of the gist of episode 1. So, big question is, how does it feel in relation to the Netflix series? I think by the look of it, it definitely is a little jarring. Like, to me, there was a big difference with the Netflix series versus anything that Marvel's ever done. And that's mainly because there wasn't this thing where they relied so much on CGI in the Daredevil series. Yeah, there was CGI in it, of course, but a lot of it was practical. A lot of the fights just looked great. And even rewatching it, like, the fight choreography still looks absolutely fantastic. It seems like Marvel kind of keeps doing what Marvel has always done, and that is replacing a lot of practical sets with CGI. And a lot of the first fight looks, I don't want to say it looks bad. It looks jarring in comparison to when you have watched season 1, 2, and 3 back to back, and then you go right into this new series. It's jarring because it looks completely different in terms of what the first 3 seasons look like. And that was because a lot of it didn't rely on CGI. But this just looks and feels like a Marvel series, for better or for worse. It's kind of like it loses a little bit of that special flavor that the OG series kind of gave us when it relies so heavily on that CGI. But nonetheless, like, regardless of how it looks, I think the fight is cool. And I think the moment itself, which we all kind of knew something was going to happen because they've been teasing this for weeks now. And I wish they hadn't. I wish they would have stayed clear away from the fact that, hey, Daredevil and Matt Murdock, they're going to experience a tragic event that's going to set forth the events of Born Again. And I wish they wouldn't have gone that route, because we all kind of expected that either Karen or Foggy was going to die in this episode. Now, I expected it to be Karen. I didn't think they would kill Foggy, so I guess that's a little bit of a surprise there. So I am a little conflicted about how I feel about Foggy dying in episode 1 in the first 15 minutes. It's kind of like we didn't really get a whole lot of time to visit with him at this point in his life. It just kind of happened. And to me, the entire first episode was about 2 episodes at least worth of content that we kind of skipped right over it. One of the things with Disney Plus and Marvel or even Lucasfilm, when they have, and this episode wasn't even short. Like, these are 2-hour-long episodes, mind you. Like, these aren't even the Mandalorian or Star Wars TV shows or Marvel shows where they're like 30, 45 minutes, This is a full hour. So it even had a little bit more to work with here. But the problem with Disney Plus and all that is that their stories are just so quick that it never gives time for any of these characters to breathe. And I think one of the issues that I have with him dying in the first 15 minutes and then they cut to 1 year later. And it's like we never really saw Matt grieve over the loss of his best friend. And it just skips right over that. And then once it cuts to the court case, we have him there. And then Karen shows up for a couple of minutes. And then they have their little talk. And then she is gone again. And truth be told, I understand that we have already kind of gotten this storyline previously with season 3. Where he kind of gave up the mantle of Daredevil and he's kind of doing it again. And now he's grieving about it in a different way. He lost his best friend here. So to me, we are retreading kind of the same waters as season 3, kind of early on, very, very basically, I would say. But I wish we would have seen a little bit more of the grieving process of Matt. And I mean, that's a huge moment in this character's arc in his life. Like, why are we not seeing a little bit more of that grieving process? I think that's, unless they explore that later on in this season, which I hope they do. As of right now, it's kind of disappointing that we didn't get a little bit more time with Foggy or even the grieving process between Karen and Matt. Karen has just completely disassociated from Matt and she has gone her separate ways. I wouldn't be surprised because I remember originally that Foggy and Karen were not supposed to come back for Born Again. And then with rewrites, they were able to come back. I would not be surprised if we don't see Karen. We might see her like one more time, if anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if we just don't see her at all the rest of the season. And this is just focused on Matt and these new characters, which is kind of disappointing that they've kind of gone that route in the creative process. I mean, Foggy and Karen were huge parts of the first 3 seasons. And the fact that we're kind of getting rid of them is a little disappointing, honestly. And aside from that being a complaint of mine with this first episode, I do love how they handled the moment that he got killed. So he's going off. Again, I think it's a little fast. I think they went through it too quickly. But we have this fight between Bullseye and Daredevil, which is a great fight, even though a lot of it is CGI, it looks like. I could be completely wrong. If I am wrong, drop a comment below and let me know the technicalities behind these scenes. I think a lot of the camera shots of his senses coming into play were really cool. And the fight itself is still cool, even though it doesn't look all that practical. Daredevil is getting his ass whooped by Bullseye. There's one point where it looks like he has like 10 knives in his chest and he's still fighting Bullseye, not even stopping, not even wasting a moment. And then we get the moment that Foggy dies, and it's, to me, one of my favorite aspects of the episode. I ended up rewatching this scene again because, when you watch a kind of a surprising or shocking scene, you kind of lose thought of some of the minor details. And going back and rewatching this, Daredevil and Bullseye are kind of like, they're not necessarily hugging, but they're right next to each other. And then that's when Daredevil realizes that Foggy dies. We get him shrieking, screaming out loud. And then we have Bullseye right in front of him just laughing. And he does like a little pat on the shoulder thing for like half of a second. And it's such a cool little detail. And that's when Matt just instantly just blanks out and just throws him over the roof. And you're like, holy shit, dude didn't give a fuck, right? And he hits the ground and you think he just killed Bullseye. And that's going to be basically the emotional core of the series going forward. And he ends up living, which I'm assuming he's going to come back later in the season, which I really hope, because I love what they have done with Bullseye in season 3, and he's just a formidable opponent for Daredevil that I hope they don't just kick him to the wayside. But that little detail of him laughing, him screaming and crying, and then the little pat on the shoulder was such a good little detail, and he just throws him off the roof, doesn't even think twice about it, and that's basically the reason why he kind of gives up the mantle of Daredevil. He didn't necessarily break his one rule, but he didn't think twice about it. He's just lucky that he didn't die in the fall, is all. So I like where they are going with this aspect of his character. Now, although we are still tackling kind of the same themes of season 3, where he wants to kill someone and then he gives up the mantle because of that. And it's retreading the same waters, I understand, but I like the direction that we're going here. And I'm very curious to know how this kind of goes forward with Matt and him as Daredevil. And then the last thing that I want to mention about this episode was the diner scene, which was pretty damn good. Not gonna lie. I don't think it's as good as the prison scene that him and Daredevil had, where they're just kind of going back and forth. I think it was in season 2, if I'm not mistaken. And it's kind of where Fisk starts realizing that Matt is Daredevil. That scene, I think, is a little bit better, but this diner scene is still great. Okay, it's as advertised with all the promos and the trailers that have come out. It starts off kind of like this cordial thing where they're showing each other respect and whatnot, even though Matt sees through the lies, and then it turns into this cat and mouse game per se, where Matt is kind of making his threats to Fisk that, hey, if you step out of line, I'm going to get you. And then Fisk, now with his anti-vigilante campaign as mayor, he's saying, well, if you step out of line, if you come back as Daredevil, I'm going to end you. And I love how we have this different aspect of these two characters now, where previously it was, I just want to kill you kind of thing. And now it's both of them are kind of tied to the same string. One acts out, the other comes back. And it's just kind of two sides of the same coin. So personally, I like where these characters are going. And I love the fact that we're getting that out of the way early on. And it's not like 5 episodes in, like the first 3 seasons, where they get very minimal screen time together. I'm glad we get that out of the way in episode 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that relationship develops between these two characters over the course of, I think it's 9 episodes for this season. But yeah, guys, I absolutely liked episode 1. It's going to be one of those things where I might end up rewatching it, especially kind of the first part of that episode. Again, I think in theory that once it gets past that first opening like 20 minutes, the episode starts feeling a little bit more familiar, like the Netflix series. But that first 20 minutes is a little jarring because it doesn't necessarily look like it was a continuation of the same series. So that's a little bit of a complaint that I have. But overall, I do like some of the fight choreography and some of the character moments, and I'm very interested in the rest of the series. Let me know down in the comments below of what you thought about episode number 1. How do you feel about Foggy dying? How do you feel about that opening sequence where it kind of looks a little jarring? Drop me a comment below, and I will catch y'all next time on the next episode. Latest.